Wisconsin will hold its primary elections tomorrow, and the race for the Republican gubernatorial nomination is a nail-biter. The latest Emerson College poll has former Lieutenant Governor Rebecca Kleefisch leading the pack at 36% among likely Republican voters. But she's within the margin of error with businessman Tim Michels, who is at 34% in the poll. 14% said they were undecided. For more on the Badger State, CBS News political reporter Aaron Navarro joins us. Aaron, good to see you. Former President Trump is backing Tim Michels, while former Vice President Mike Pence is supporting Rebecca Kleefisch. Is this just another proxy war between the former president and vice president? And if so, what does that say about where the party and Republican voters stand?
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me. So this race will give us another checkpoint on whether a Trump endorsement is enough to get a candidate over that finish line through that primary. Trump backed Michels in the beginning of June, nearly 2 months ago. That's a bit different than his early endorsement of Kari Lake in Arizona's governor race, or his endorsement of Tudor Dixon, the nominee for governor in Michigan, which came days before the primary. There's been room for this endorsement to be out there and for voters to vet the choices, and polls show that this race is still a dead heat. You mentioned that Emerson College poll that showed Kleefisch within that margin of error, just a 2-point lead. And interestingly enough, that same poll showed that almost half of Republican voters, 49%, said Trump's endorsement was not a factor in their decision. And lastly, this is the third time that Trump and Pence have backed different candidates for governor. We saw that last week in Arizona when Trump's pick, Kari Lake, won. And we saw that a couple months ago in Georgia when Brian Kemp won pretty decisively in his primary against former Senator David Perdue.
Yeah, so it sounds like they're 1 for 1. We'll see how tomorrow turns out. But, you know, Tim Michels is embracing former President Trump while not committing to overturning or decertifying the 2020 election results. How has he been able to walk that line?
So publicly, he's had to adjust at times. In one debate, when he was asked if he'd prioritize the decertification of Biden's win in Wisconsin, he said he would not. The next debate that followed, he said he'd keep the options on the table. So there's not much of political background to Michels, unlike Kleefisch, who has had a history serving with Governor Scott Walker in Madison. And while Michels has avoided outright saying the 2020 election was, quote, stolen in the past, at the most recent Trump rally in Waukesha, he talked emphatically about, quote, bringing election integrity back to Wisconsin. And it's worth noting in this whole conversation about decertification, there's not a legal path for that to happen. House Speaker Robin Vos, a Republican that has pushed a lot of election-related legislation after 2020, has had to repeat that this is not possible. But Trump has made that his pet issue in the state, especially after the state Supreme Court ruled that drop boxes are illegal. So expect this topic to remain with Republican candidates going into November.
I know you're also tracking the Democratic Senate primary, where 3 of the leading candidates dropped out at the last minute, giving Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes a clear path for the nomination. What exactly drove the Democrats to consolidate behind him?
They want to beat Republican Senator Ron Johnson. That was in a lot of their statements of them dropping out. A couple of them have been trailing in the polls. Some have said they weren't fundraising at a high enough clip. But Barnes, who already serves statewide as lieutenant governor, has consistently remained near the top for fundraising and for polls. So the candidates decided that if they wanted to beat Republican Senator Ron Johnson, it's best to avoid a combative primary that could really drain resources when they need them. One candidate, Alex Lasry, an executive for the Milwaukee Bucks, the NBA team there, immediately started running pro-Barnes ads in the week he dropped out. So this shows all of the candidates are fully behind Barnes. And it's worth noting, even though all these candidates dropped out, all of their names will still remain on the ballot. So while Barnes is expected to win the primary on Tuesday, you could still see a little bit of the share of votes going to these candidates who are no longer even running.
And as far as the Republican incumbent, Ron Johnson, the senator has drawn headline after headline for controversy, from his comments on the coronavirus pandemic to his remarks on the Capitol attack. How do Wisconsin Republicans feel about his chances in November?
So this is a top offensive seat for Democrats working Senate races this year, but Republicans in D.C. and in Wisconsin feel good about Senator Johnson's chances. They note he's had a similar approval rating throughout his 2 terms, and in the last fundraising quarter, Johnson actually outraised his Democratic opponents. But since this is a federal race, a lot could depend on the political environment. Republicans so far have benefited from economic frustrations. They benefited from Biden's low approval rating, but abortion access could also be an animating deciding factor against Johnson in November. There's a fight right now to repeal an 1849 abortion law that outlaws the procedure in Wisconsin. How that goes and how top of mind abortion access is as an issue for voters in November could also play into Johnson's chances.
All right, Aaron Navarro, you got a busy day Tuesday. Thanks so much.
Every Tuesday. Thanks, Nicole.